story is told about a woman who walks up to a little old man, happily rocking in a chair on his porch, relaxing. And the lady says to this little old man, "I couldn't help noticing how happy you look. What is your secret for a long, happy life?" Surprisingly, the little old man answers, "I want you to know I smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I drink a case of whiskey every week. I eat fatty foods, and I never exercise." "That's amazing," the woman exclaims. "And how old are you?" 26, he said. Sometimes things are not exactly the way they look. We have a picture, and then the picture is shattered. Another story about a politician who goes to the proverbial pearly gates at the end of his life, and they offer him a choice between heaven and hell. So of course he'd like to make an informed choice, so he asks to see both of them. Now heaven looks very calm with all the angelic figures and their spiritual delights. So he asks to see hell, and they show him tremendous parties going on. So of course he says, "Hell is for me." And immediately he falls into a fiery dungeon. "Hey, wait a minute, what happened to all those parties?" he asks. "Oh, those were just campaign promises." Campaign promises. We're used to that. We've been disillusioned and lied to many times, and many people don't vote for that reason. But there are some campaigns that go on not between the Republicans and the Democrats, the liberals, the conservatives. There are campaigns that go within our own selves. And there are different forces constantly making promises of future happiness, and we have to be careful that we don't fall into the same trap. This is necessary to understand what happens with Yaakov as he vanquishes the angel of Esav in Parshas Vayishlach. Very strange episode. Yaakov is alone. The Sarah Shel Esav, the angel of Esav, comes to do battle with him, and they're struggling, and finally Yaakov prevails. And Yaakov says, "I want a bracha." The angel gives it to him. Then Yaakov asks, "What is your name?" And the angel says, "What do you need my name for? Lama zeh tisha lishmi? What are you asking for?" Now, I don't understand. The angel's being beaten up. You can imagine if somebody has somebody else in a headlock, they could pound his head away, and you say, "Okay, what's your name?" He says, "What do you want to know for?" "I got you in a headlock. I'm going to pound your head until you tell me your name." So Yaakov Avinu's prevailed over the Sarah Shel Esav, and the Sarah Shel Esav, the angel's willing to give him brachas. And a simple question, "What is your name?" And he says, "Why are you asking what my name is? Don't ask so many questions." That's an answer? That's the answer to somebody that has you in a headlock? The Bali Musar answer on this, a very beautiful answer. The truth is that the angel of Esav answered the question asked. Yaakov wants to know, what is your name? Meaning, what is your power? What is your essence? And the answer was, don't ask too many questions. Lama zeh tisha lishmi is the answer. If you ask too many questions, you'll see that I have no substance, but I have the power of spinning illusions. And that's the power of Esav, the power of the Yetzer Hara, is it tricks mankind with campaign promises, with false illusions. The Yetzer Hara is the ultimate con man. The Maggid, Rav Shradron, said over a mashal, the person goes into a dark theater and he sees there's an image on the screen. And he wants to see a little bit better. So he shines his flashlight on the old-fashioned movie screens that work with projectors. And lo and behold, what happens? Instead of seeing the picture better, it disappears. The other people in the theater start yelling at him, "Turn out your flashlight. Don't you understand this picture can be only seen in darkness? Once you shine your light on it, it disappears." And that's the message that all of us struggle with. From people. We know the Yetzer Hara is a con job, and yet, many times we're still taken in. There's an interesting story about a newspaper reporter in Eretz Yisrael standing outside a tshuva rally. People who don't look like committed Jews are gathering to hear a Rav. We know Amnon Yitzchak and others are able to fill up stadiums with messages that people are thirsty to hear, even though people don't look that religious on the outside. So this newspaper reporter asked a rather unreligious looking young Israeli man who looked like he was considering becoming religious. He asked him, who is a bigger hero? The Israeli youth like you who've tasted the pleasures of secular lifestyle and you're considering becoming religious? Or the other boys, the black hatters who grew up this way, the FFBs, the frum from birth? And of course, the reporter expected that the Israeli would answer, obviously we're doing something greater because we've tasted the pleasures and we're willing to give it up. And yet, this young Israeli person answered the reporter, the black hatters, the FFBs, they're the real heroes. The reporter is surprised. Why, he asks. He says, we've tasted all of the pleasures of Dizengoff Square, and we know it's really not satisfying. So it's easier for us to look to Torah. But those kids that grow up in religious areas, they might think in their imagination that they're missing something, that somewhere on Dizengoff Square there's some great pleasure that they're deprived of. In other words, the FFBs have to cope with the illusions that the Yetzer Hara, that the con man spins in their minds. While people from the outside who've already experienced it and realize they've been conned, for them it's easier to come to look to Torah. Now this is an important point for many parents to know, especially parents who are Balei Tshuva. They grew up without the benefit of religious education. They might become religious later in life, and then they move into Monsey or Brooklyn. They send their kids to the best yeshivas, and they're surprised that the children are a little bit less enthusiastic than they were. And they say, you kidding? They tell their children, if only I would have been frum at your age, I would have had this education, I would have the skills to learn Gemara and to learn Medrash in the original. I wasted those years, but look at what you have, you're so lucky. But they don't realize that those children face quite unique tests, and maybe greater tests than their parents have, because the children have to fight the illusions spun by the con man, the Yetzer Hara, while the parents who've been in that world and know it's not satisfying don't have that kind of test. We find in Parshas Chukas that when there is a plague of snakes, so Hashem tells Moshe to take a snake and put it up high on a pole, and whoever looks at it will be cured. Rav Miller tries to explain the seemingly strange idea by saying simply, if one is bitten, so to speak, by the Yetzer Hara, just hold it up, expose it to the light, and then you'll be cured, because when you start thinking about it deeply, objectively, intensely, you see that it's nothing. A similar point is made by Rav Chaim Shmulevitz on Kohelas. There it talks about a poor wise man who in his wisdom saved the besieged city. And you know, the Pasuk doesn't tell us how his wisdom saved that city. After all, wisdom seems to be a very poor counterbalance to a big army encamped outside the walls of your city. Reb Chaim says the reason the Pasuk doesn't tell us what strategy he advised the people in the city to employ is because there was nobody outside the city. It was an illusion. And it was only the wise man that could convince the people that were suffering from an illusion of being besieged. If one would want secular examples of illusions, you just have to look at the fact that many people go to Graceland Mansion to get married. Graceland was a tourist spot and has the revenues of upwards of $15 million yearly, and this was the place where Elvis Presley lived. Now people go to get married because they think, Elvis Presley, he was the man, and I want to get married his place. So people think into Elvis's own life. He got married to his first wife, had a baby daughter, and walked out on his wife to live with different women. Still not happy. He used drugs. Some say he had thousands of them, and he dies of a drug overdose at the age of 42. Is this a model that people would really want for themselves when they get married? Graceland is a site of an unmitigated failure. But the answer is nobody asks. Because if you would ask, then you would realize it. This is not only good advice in our spiritual lives, but it can save a person a lot of money. There was an article in November 2013 from the AARP based on an interview with a con man. And in it, he talks about how he was able to con people. And he writes, "You might be thinking, oh, those get-rich-quick scams are obvious. I would never fall for one." The con man said to the Federal Trade Commission, where he was testifying, in order to do a little repentance for his past crimes, he's, so to speak, a financial Baal Tshuva. He says, when I hear somebody say the only people who are stupid fall for fraud, I feel like asking for his phone number. Because I don't speak to stupid people, because stupid people normally don't have a lot of money laying around I can scam them out of. You'd be amazed, the con man tells the Federal Trade Commission, at how many doctors, lawyers, engineers, and college professors I've ripped off. Fraud is a crime that can happen to anyone given the right con artist and the right circumstances. And he explains that emotion trumps intellect for most people. And when he gets somebody on the phone, he starts off with the idea, you and I are going to make a tremendous amount of money today. And he starts spinning that fantasy of easy money. And he sees what the person on the other end of the line reacts. If the other person signs into the fantasy and joins him, then he can scam him. If the other person asks too many questions, how does this make sense? How come other people aren't doing it? He immediately hangs up. Because he told the Federal Trade Commission, victims don't ask questions. They just join into my daydream. That is a financial application of Lama Zeh Tishal Lishmei. When people fall for all these financial scams, it's because they're able to con and paint this fantasy picture that people want to believe that there's an easy way to make money. And because of that, not only don't they make money, they lose the money. That con man, standing before the Federal Trade Commission, he is an example of Sarah Shel Esav. He's an example of what the Yetzer Hara does to all of us. In the spiritual world, in the physical world. The way that we fight back is to use our mind, to be analytical, and to examine what we're being told. To hold it up on a pole, expose it to light, and to realize that the whole power of the forces that seek to defeat us, whether in the physical world or the spiritual world, with cons and campaign promises, is Lama Zeh Tishal Lishmei. Why are you asking so many questions? Victims don't ask questions. If we want to make sure we're not victims in the outer world and in the inner world, we have to use our mind to ask very, very penetrating questions. Thank you.